Thank you. But with that, I want to bring our panel to the focus with our final talk for the weekend, celebrating unique games with Carol Mertz, Adam Schroeder, Bahiyya Khan, and TJ Hughes.
Yes.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here. Just a really quick background on celebrating unique games. 3 years ago was when we kind of shifted the focus of PixelPop toward experimentation and really breaking the status quo of the industry. And that's something we've been really leaning into for the past few years. And so ever since we started shifting our focus into experimentation and unique games, we've been doing this panel every year so that we bring in devs who are on site, who are speaking or who are showing games to talk about the cool stuff that's going on in the industry that we might not see already. So this is something that's really important to us, that we may not be able to see everything on the expo hall. We can only see, unfortunately, the people who are able to bring their games here, which thank you for talking about how we need to, think more consciously about how we can bring remote games as well. But this is our opportunity to start bringing light to more interesting, more exciting things that are going on that we may not be able to see. So once again, I'm Carol Mertz. I'm the co-founder and executive, what is it? What is my title anymore? I'm so tired. Executive producer? Am I the executive director? That's the word. And of PixelPop, and I've been working really hard, so bear with me if I'm tired. And I would like all of the panelists to have a moment to introduce themselves. So as Jordan mentioned, we have Bahiyya, TJ, and Adam. If you want to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do in games, just to give some folks a background.
Okay, so I said this 20 minutes ago, but so my name is Bahiyya, and I'm based in Johannesburg in South Africa, and I make obviously video games and do writing now and then, and I make games about social issues that are happening in my country. So the game that I have here at the moment is After Hours, and it's about sexual assault and borderline personality disorder. But yeah, I just make games that I wish existed, because I find most games really boring to myself, so I make games that I would like to play.
Mm-hmm.
What's poppin'? I'm TJ.
Pixels, apparently.
Pixels, yeah. Pixels are popping.
It's kind of gross sounding, isn't it? It's a little gross.
Are they juicy?
Cool. Okay. Cool.
Are they like a gusher? Ooh. Anyway, I make colorful experimental games, kind of more like self-expression games, and very just not traditional games. So my current game, Noor, which hopefully you got to play it out on the floor, it's a game where you're just playing with your food and mashing buttons, and you're just making a mess like you're a kid again, but it's all virtual and you don't have to clean it up. And so I kind of went in the direction of just unique games, just kind of because I felt like we're very limited by our thoughts of what a game can be about, and we are very conflict centric when it comes to video games, and so I just thought we can show that we can do a lot more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Adam Schroeder. I make stuff under the name R25th. I do a lot of stuff. I've made some interesting zines and some tabletop stuff, but I've been mainly focusing on alternative controller stuff as of lately. I had 2 games in the hall this weekend. I had a thing in the rules to play by called Everything is Connected. It was a collaborative board game where every player adds to it and makes a step towards the ultimate goal. And then I had Ossia Glow, which is my LED-based rhythm game. So there's a lot of different stuff going on. Mainly all control stuff right now.
Cool.
Less prepared than everyone else.
So Bahiyya, you mentioned when you were talking about you make games that you want to play because you think most games are boring. I super identify with that, because I tell people I don't like most games, but I love games. I when I find a game that I connect with, it just connects so deeply. So I kind of I'm curious from everybody's perspective, but specifically you, because you mentioned that, I think that's really interesting. What is it that draws you to games? What is it that makes you want to make and play games? What is it about the medium specifically?
I think the level of engagement and interactivity, that people have with video games, it's sort of I don't know, unparalleled in other mediums. Like, I really enjoy storytelling because I feel like we tell stories to make sense of our lives and the world, and it kind of makes things more easier for us to understand and like live our lives and whatever. I mean, like, people have been telling stories forever, whether it's like cave drawings or whatever. Now we just make video games, right? So it's just sort of continuing a really ancient form of storytelling. And I think I would engage with anything that told a story. It just so happened that I like went into video game design at university, which is why it's taking precedence in my life right now. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's what is the most present part of your life. It's your present part of study.
Yeah.
So do you foresee yourself like shifting from games or like merging games into other media?
I feel like that's something I came into this knowing already. Like, it's not like, oh, this is just what I'll be doing. Because like, even with my game, After Hours, the entire game is comprised of film footage. So I think of myself as like someone that works with a lot of different mediums. Was it media? I never know the singular and plural. But
I think it's both. I don't think it matters.
Okay. But yeah, so I don't know, just anything that makes me feel like I can tell a story is something that I think is cool. So whether that's like music or writing or making video games, yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I saw my face on the staring back at me and I looked stoned as shit.
It's JPEG'd up there.
It's very JPEG, I'm sorry.
No, that just looked like that in real life. I feel like my face is that pixelated.
It is, yeah.
Cool. Yes.
You've got a little pixel there.
Yeah, it's okay. So yeah, like I said, it's what's taking the most sort of time in my life at this moment because I started it and I'm kind of like in between school. But I don't feel like restricted to anything. I don't feel like I have to make games as a career, and I don't want to because I feel like it would make me really unhappy. Like, I like making it in the space that I do at the moment, and if I happen to make money from it, that would be wonderful. But like, I feel like I'm probably going to go into some other career path.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a good tool for expression right now.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily your goal.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Just on a side note, I want to make jam. Like, you know, jam, fruit.
Like
for
jelly
eating.
and jam.
like
Oh,
the
I don't know what you guys
preserves.
call it in America. We just call it jam. And make like small clothing for insects. I know that sounds...
Yes.
But-
I support this.
So if anyone wants to fund that project, let me know.
Amazing. So
Like-
TJ.
Yeah.
TJ and Adam. So what is it about games specifically then that draws you into it? And is it something that you foresee or like that you see yourself using simply as expression, or is it something that you're trying to, you know, turn into a more sustainable career sort of situation?
Yeah. I view games right now as sort of a underdog in the just media in general, just because of like, I guess like how little respect it gets in a lot of ways, like especially in like art spaces. Like I gave a talk on this a while while I was in San Jose, and one thing I learned while researching for that talk was that games weren't legally protected as free speech in America until like 2011, and so like legally I haven't been making art since like 8 years ago or whatever. So it's just like that's interesting, and so like I don't know. I always felt like fighting for games as art as being like just pushing the medium and just like it's sort of this underdog that we really need to nurture into like kind of this this thing that everyone understands. Like you can to the point where you can say like, yeah, gaming and not Fortnite not be the first thing that people think about.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm drawn to games because it's an active medium. Like the person interfacing with it has to put forth effort to be a part of it. Because like more traditional stuff like movies and books and stuff, like you can go through the paces and you can like be present for it, but you're not necessarily interacting with it in the same way games do. So asking the person viewing your work to like put forth the effort, even if they don't get something out of it, they're trying, and you have a better capacity to put forth a mood or an idea, stuff like that. I also, kind of bouncing off TJ, gaming's really young. It's been around since like late 70s, Atari 2600 times. Like, we're still in this like formative period of no one knows what a game is yet. Like, we thought what stuff was with like board games and that kind of thing, and then we're like, okay, tennis on the Atari 2600 is like the height of gaming, and then the definition's still fluid and nothing's like laid down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like the 60s, we started seeing like the earliest like Space War and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was like, the earliest iterations of arcade games. But also games go way back as this, ancient, like we look at things like Go, we look at things like chess. These are ancient games that we've been playing for centuries. And it's interesting that this is a battle that we're still fighting. It's like, take us seriously. So TJ, one of the things that I think you said about like this idea that suddenly within the last decade we're starting to recognize games as maybe an art form finally, as being a means of expression. Can you maybe provide some examples, like all of you? What are some examples that you're seeing? I mean, like Bahiyya, like your game After Hours being this merging of film and interactivity for self-expression to tell this story. Like, what are some other examples of games that are doing basically things that you might expect to see in an art space? What are the games that are challenging our perception of games right now?
Yeah. Anytime I'm talking about experimental games, I have to shout out my dude David O'Reilly for making this game called Everything, where you can play as literally everything. You can just like shift consciousness from like a blade of grass to like a tree to like a deer to like an island to a planet to a like star system, and all this is happening while like really calming music and Alan Watts quotes are like playing in your ears, and so it's just like the most like whoa dude like experience ever. But like
it's incredibly chill.
It's incredibly chill, and it fits really well within art spaces. And he's actually one of my like primary just like examples of just like seeing a game developer going into an art space and doing things with arts institutions. And it's just really cool to see because it is kind of this like precedent, like he's kind of creating this precedent that I don't see happen very often. And so a lot of what I'm doing is kind of like following in his footsteps and then like kind of seeing things that he's doing and being like, oh, okay. But at the same time, there's just like so many different directions you can go with such a thing too.
Well, what's interesting about O'Reilly's work is he started as a filmmaker, right?
Yeah.
And so he approaches game making very much from a filmmaker's perspective. And everything has a let it play on its own mode, right? So like you can even just walk away and you can just watch it, or you can engage with it. Another really interesting thing that I think is pretty groundbreaking about that work is, wasn't his game trailer was nominated for an Oscar?
Yeah, which like
as like a short film.
Game trailer was?
Yeah.
Like he cut a short film, right?
Yeah, he cut a short film, just a 10-minute film of it was just gameplay. It's just gameplay, and it was just like kind of curated, but it wasn't really like edited really. And just that alone, he just put that out as a piece, like from this thing that like when you play the game, you won't have like the exact same experience. Like it'll be roughly this, like it'll be similar, but it won't be exactly the same. And it's so interesting that you can just record out a 10-minute like snippet from this like really amorphous piece of work and just put that out and it win an Oscar. Like that's incredible. I think that speaks to how much games are art. It's like it's not only art, it's like infinite art,
infinite possibility,
yeah.
even infinite art,
infinite possibility art. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other interesting examples of projects that are really pushing the boundaries like that?
So there's a couple of things. One thing that comes to mind is Kaito Takahashi, whose main thing he's done is make Katamari Damacy. He had a game like 10 years ago or something like that called Nobi Nobi Boy. And it's really just kind of a playground. Like you have a character and they can stretch and they can like run around and do stuff, but there's no like immediate goal. There's nothing that says you've won or lost this. It's just a playground to like experience it. And there's the ultimate goal of getting your girlfriend to stretch all the way to Pluto because she really wants to go to Pluto, I guess. So like you can stretch and you can send off that length to Nobi Nobi Girl, and each planet is its own level. But Nobi Nobi Girl is dictated an actual real world length. So it's like trillions of miles that you have to give to her in order to get Pluto, and every single player contributes. So every single person who's played can give length to this. So we didn't unlock Pluto until like 5 years after the game, and it's not because we needed like an ultimate goal or anything. It's just people playing around this little playground that he's made, and this like slow burn of discovering more things and just self-expression in a pretty freeing space.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you have any
Yeah.
shout-outs?
My game, did I mention? I'm just kidding. So I feel like I didn't grow up playing video games. I only sort of got into it when I was like 19, when I just started university. So I think that my idea of like games as art is quite different maybe to someone who's been engaging with it forever, because I went into it thinking of it as an art form. I only found out that it was actually a debate like very recently, and I was like, why would it not be an art form? Like I literally even went to art school for games, like, so it just didn't make any sense to me. I think that like people have very preconceived ideas of what they think art should look like. So if some games like visually kind of subscribe to what they consider, art to be looking like, then they would think, oh, well, this game is art. But like other games that seem more simple or like aren't their traditional ideas of art, I don't think that they're less art because they're not your version of art. So I guess what I would say is that games are art, like full stop, duh.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I absolutely don't think that like we should even be arguing or like having this like question is like why should we try to qualify it when we're putting in the work. Like I think games have so many different aspects to them, so many different feelings that we're putting into them between the aesthetics, all the different aesthetics that go into making a game, all the different engineering that goes into making a game. All of that in itself as an individual is art in itself. So all of it together is like the ultimate art.
The ultimate art. The real all arts.
Right? So I think like what I'm most curious about is like which games are like pushing that even farther. Like which games are the ones that are, like we're talking about, the ones that are like really actually impacting different industries, the ones that are making us think, oh wow, like this is something that we could bring into other fields because it's doing something so different, because we're cutting a short film out of a video game, because we're telling an intimate story about mental health in a video game. That's what's exciting, is that we can do that and also make it a space to engage with, like what we were saying about why we come to games in the first place, right? So I guess, have we seen other projects or other things, like even on the horizon, that are approaching these ideas or creating these new spaces for us?
I think Nintendo's always kind of been ahead of the curve when it comes to like that kind of subject matter of just like making games that like you can almost not argue, like you can argue whether or not it is a game. Like it extends like our game's art question of like, is this art game a game? And so it gets real complicated real fast. But
talk about that in academia too. That's fun.
Yeah. In I think 2006, Nintendo released Electroplankton, which was a game where it was a DS game where there were all these little these fish creatures, and you would just like interact with them in certain ways, and they would make sounds and noises, and like, but really instrumental sounds. And at the end of the day, like it would all kind of sound like experimental jazz, kind of. But you could make a lot of like really cool chords and melodies with this game. But like there was no goal, there was no progression, there was nothing like that. When you load the game into your DS, it gives you all, I think, like 7 or so levels. It just lays it out right there. It's just like, here they are. Play any one. You can just like start one up, play around with electroplankton. It makes weird beep boop sounds, and then at any point you can just exit out, and just whenever you're satisfied. And I think like when I'm making a game like mine, like that's huge because it's just like, wow, this shows me I can do this. Like this is allowed. You're allowed to sell a game for like $16.99 that like works like this, and like that's been like a fear of mine in releasing my game, is just like, oh, if it doesn't have a main mechanic or progression or like, I don't know, kill streaks or something like that, will people review bomb it? Will it be like frowned upon? How will it be received? And so I just think that having just even one standout example of that just like can change everything.
I want to bounce off a bit and talk about good old Nintendo again. I really like Labo, their cardboard nonsense. It's really, I feel like a lot of people missed the point of it when it came out. Everyone's like, why would I want this stuff made out of cardboard littering my house? But as someone who's got it, it's really good at like teaching people how stuff works. Like you're folding this stuff together and you're seeing the individual components and how everything fits together, and it's this like experiment in alternative controllers that is like packaged up into your house, and you physically assemble it and figure out how everything works. Like the fishing rod in it, there's this this like line that goes to the actual box. It doesn't use that at all. It's like there visually, there's something attached to it, and like the reel has like makes a little clickety clack noise when you do it, and that's because they have a slot of cardboard with a bunch of holes on the reel, and it's like just showing you like, here's how this intricate hardware works, and you can do something like this. All you need is like a good X-Acto blade and like some cardboard and some ingenuity, and you can do this. And I think that's really important to like kids and people who are interested in alternative controller stuff and just figuring out how things work.
Yeah, straight up like educational. Like
if
I had that as a kid, I would like.
It's straight up educational stuff. I forget who it is. It's like some German guy from like the 1920s. I feel really bad because I don't remember his name, but he had this like concept that in like kindergarten you gift the children this like box of all these educational toys, and you don't give any instructions, and you don't have like anyone leading it, and they'll just figure out how this stuff works through natural play.
Yeah. What's interesting about both of those examples, both electroplankton and the Labo, is that both of them are not only very creative games, like, or creative media, it's also very accessible. Like electroplankton, it's just tapping, right? It's just like this a simple input. And with Labo, it's like you're allowing people to experience gameplay in a very different, more physical way that might actually allow more people to play the game than would otherwise with a smaller controller.
Yeah, and even like Rock Band, like that's the key alternative controller thing. Like getting a whole set of that together is like $200 back when it was like brand new. But Labo, it's like $80. You get 5 different things. So even if it's something you're like not interested in, you have it, and it's not prohibitively expensive. And even if like you get tired of it and you just want like the space back, it's not a big loss. It's not going in a landfill because it's just cardboard. Just like tear it down and then chuck in the recycling.
Have you seen other like examples of this kind of more interesting approach to input and gameplay impact like the future of games? Have you seen that, or even games as they are? Have you seen any examples of games that are using kind of more interesting, more unique input methods to tell stories or to engage players, or to try to create a new experience?
Yeah, so I think this is how you pronounce his name. It's this guy I follow on Twitter. I think his name is Eli Coley or something.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Eli.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is, but it's just like someone that I follow because I think like he posts a lot of really interesting GIFs of stuff that he's like just messing around with or whatever. And I don't think a lot of games like by like my personal standards are really, but I'm also not like super educated, so on the games that are out there, I'm sure they do exist, but yeah, I don't see any games that are doing anything that I think is particularly cool. But some of the stuff that Eli posts, it makes me feel like super unsettled, which I think is really cool. That's a big compliment, Eli, wherever you are. And yeah, it's just like the way he's like done this thing. There's something that I'm thinking of specifically. I don't know if anyone follows him, but it's kind of like you're looking at something through a shutter. It's like this circle, and it looks like a forest is on fire, and it's just I don't know. It reminds me of this game that I want to make about a mouse, which is why I really like remembered it. But yeah, I don't know. And it's just like one or two GIFs, but it's something that stuck with me so much because of the like super unsettling quality that it has. It just seems like something you'd never see in a video game.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
I love that because like we so often kind of expect the same emotions to like for video games to evoke from us. It's like almost always, you know, this feeling of heroism, or this feeling of sometimes fear, or you know, these kind of typical action emotions. And to have even an image from a game evoke this sense of feeling unsettled, that's really interesting. I love it when games can kind of bring something out of you that you wouldn't expect. I think somebody mentioned even today to me, from having experienced something at the Flow Gallery, they were like, I did not expect to cry today coming to PixelPop Festival. But you know, there are so many opportunities to use that level of engagement and interactivity to teach you about yourself, or to teach you about, you know, the people around you, and make you think about things. Not saying that, you know, these creepy forests on fire are teaching you about yourself, but you are realizing like there's something about this that makes me feel weird, and maybe I should think about that.
Yes, how do I cultivate that feeling? It's spread throughout, yeah.
I think the weirdest input in a game that I've ever had the experience of experiencing was I exhibited in South Korea this summer as a part of something called Food Hack. I showed the food game there, and there's this other exhibit there that was a VR food tasting, and so that was really interesting because like I don't think you've ever eaten something while having a VR headset on, unless you've had like a box of
That seems terrifying.
Cheez-Its.
Talking about unsettling.
Yeah.
Somebody just shoving food in your face.
At first it was. I was just like, wow, like, is this going to taste like doo-doo, or like, is this going to be like something like, yeah, I don't know. It was gourmet cooking, luckily.
Oh, good.
But there was a lot of trust that went into that exhibition. Anyway, so
This is gonna.
so I was sitting. So you sit down. They put the headset on you, and it was one of those headsets where like it can actually track like your hands, so you actually see your like a representation of your hands in the digital space, and that was really interesting. Just like kind of making that mental connection of just like, whoa, that is me, or at least that's a representation of me. And what would happen is every now and then a dish would appear right here, and it was a very specially like shaped so that you can like grab it and like kind of put it up to your chin and kind of just roll the food into your mouth. And so like it worked way better than I thought it was going to. I was just like, this is well designed. But what you would see in VR is so this dish would have like it would be motion tracked also, so you can kind of see it. It would have this representation of the food, and it was really abstract. So like it wouldn't look like food. It would, like, for example, I ate what looked like an amorphous blob with a bunch of. It was just like stark red with a bunch of green like circly bits like kind of around it.
I would probably eat that.
Yeah, right. It sounds appetizing. And so you just like take it, and you see your virtual hand lift this weird, definitely pixels like and polygons like object. You lift it up to your mouth and you just kind of like throw it back, and then like you're kind of primed to like, because of the color and just like weird abstract like things that just suggest your brain to your brain like oh, this is gonna taste like red, whatever that is. And so but like I eat it and I'm just like, wow, it's like rice and like condensed milk with like raspberry and like hints of cardamom. Like, whoa, this is like it was just like so interesting. And it's like, what is
So
it like?
did it taste red?
It tasted fairly red. It was like raspberry.
I'm fascinated by this because like, how do you play test something like that? Like, how do you get it to the point where like it tastes like what you're representing?
Yeah, and like it could just be that it's entirely just subjective, and we just like attach our own like patterns to like what we see and what we taste. And so but yeah, it was just a wild experience, and it was really good food, actually.
I love this.
Yeah, it was like a professional chef. And so yeah, I think that was the most interesting input, is like your perception and your just your precognition of like your anticipation is kind of the input there.
Yeah.
Right. The question was about like interesting control inputs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like what are the tools or the inputs or the things that developers are doing right now that makes games more unique, that makes games a little bit more interesting to play and experience and creates more of an emotional impact.
Can I go back a bit further than
Yeah,
now?
you can talk about whatever you want. This is
Okay.
all us. We got whatever. We got how long do we got? We got like 25 minutes.
Oh, dang. It's not as interesting as TJ's, but I'm going to go back to an obscure PS2 game. It's called Adventures of Cookie and Cream.
Mm-hmm.
It's by From Software. Yes, the Dark Soul people.
It's the Dark Souls of food.
It is absolutely not. It is a cutesy co-op game where you play as these two rabbits and you have to get through the level, and it's like cut into two halves so you can like push things across and help the other one across. But you play it on one controller. So both people are like holding these halves of the controller and they're trying to help the other one across and get through this level, but they have to like make sure that the inputs aren't too wild and that they're accommodating to the other person so that you both actually have input on it, because you're both trying to use the single piece of machinery together to accomplish pretty much different actions but the same goal.
Yeah, I love those like two-player games where you really do need the other person.
Yeah, like you actually have to like cooperate with the other person and make them comfortable enough to get through and not like yank the controller around and all this stuff.
Yeah, that kind of actually, so one of the things that I was studying a little bit during my MFA when I was at the Game Center, which, thank you, Game Center, for sponsoring the stage. Shout outs, sorry, I have to do that.
Sponsorships, yeah.
But while I was at the Game Center, I was studying like a genre that I kind of lovingly named date games, because I think it's really interesting to play a two-player cooperative game that's not violent, because like why would I want to like shoot a bunch of aliens when I'm sitting next to a cutie? Like that's not romantic whatsoever. I want to like, oh well, I mean maybe it is. I've also done that. I have shot aliens with a cutie. But what's really fun is like collaborating, right? Mm-hmm. There's a game called We Were Here that is it's a free game that is a two-player networked game where one person is the librarian and one person is the adventurer or the explorer or something. And the librarian is telling the explorer where to go. And it's all about communication. And that's like, you learn so much about each other in those kinds of spaces. And I think that there's something really interesting there about being able to have that kind of like intimate connection with your brains. Because like with something like Cookies and Cream, it's like you have to communicate to get to get those things done. And the more you communicate, the closer you get, the closer you feel, then you start snuggling cuties.
Yeah, the bunnies are there for you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Would you say like Magic can be classified as a two-player cooperative game?
Why not?
But what's the win?
Survival.
Did
that's
someone say
death.
death?
It's a survival game.
Yeah, if you make it till one of you
Like
dies,
a
I guess
harder
you.
survival game.
There are no winners.
That's cynical. There are no winners. Like you
Everyone's a winner.
You reach the natural conclusion of the relationship, which is one of you is gone now.
Oh.
No, but that's really interesting. Is like, could you turn and this? I mean,
Imagine it into a game.
well, I mean, it kind of feeds into the Jane McGonigal stuff of like the super better, like your life can be gamified, right? Which is kind of weird. But if you can look at your relationship as, are we communicating well? How can we level up our communication skills? Are we cooking together? Do we get points for cooking together? Are we sleeping together? If we're not sleeping together, maybe we should level that up, or maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should talk about, it's interesting to think about, like how we can apply strategy to make relationships better, or apply game-like thinking to, change different aspects of our lives for the better.
Yeah. I think that's a strength that games have that a lot of other mediums don't, is that sure, watching a movie you can sympathize with someone and be like, oh, I get what that character's feeling right now, but like games, you are that character. You do feel a certain way, especially like role-playing games where it's just like, oh snap, I just killed that character that has an innocent family to feed or whatever. Just like, dang, I feel guilt like myself, like not this like virtual avatar of me. Like, wow, I actually feel bad. Like I can never choose the bad like jerk dialogues in like RPG games. Like I just like feel so bad. And so yeah, I just think that that's a strength that games have that like just I think can lead to a lot of change.
One game I wanted to shout out. It's fairly well known, but Emily Was Away. It's pretty much just like a dialogue tree discussion thing, but it requires you to type out your response. So you like choose what you want to say to their character, but you have to physically like just mash the keyboard, which kind of intertwines your emotions and actions with the game. It's like just that tiny bit more.
Yeah,
It's
you
like,
really embody the character.
yeah,
at that
like
point.
even just
You're
like
typing.
keyboard smashing, it's like you've done a physical action outside of just like select one of the three things that you can say.
Yeah. Bahiyya, I know you asked that kind of as a joke, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, what is your feeling on?
Unmarried.
Well, no. I mean, like, what is your feeling on that idea of like being able to like bring? Because I know you feel very strongly about like separate your life from your industry. Like, you are not your industry.
Right.
But like, how? Like, do you see the ability to bring game design into your life in that way?
I mean, it's like, I don't know why I said yes when you said that, like I was agreeing. I mean, I do agree, but I also don't agree. I think it was just like, like how people are like, oh, I'm good when they ask, how are you doing? But like,
Yeah, it's like, no, but I'm total garbage.
Yeah. I don't think of like games as like completely separate from my life. I don't think that that's possible because I mean, literally in my life,
Right.
But it's not my life, if that makes sense. It's in it, but it's not all of it. What was the question again?
The question is, do you see ability, or do you see the ability for game design to impact your life for the better, or using game design tools to impact your life for the better?
Absolutely. So this is like a bit of stuff from like my personal life, right? So buckle up, teens. So I have borderline personality disorder, and I was super unhealthy like a few years ago. Just I was not a good person. Like I didn't realize that I was really mean to like my friends and the guy that I was dating and myself, I think the most. And I was just, the guy that I was dating was also my best friend, and I was so awful to him. And now it's still something that I'm like trying to deal with, because I mean that's awful, like harming someone that you love, especially when you start seeing how bad your behavior was. Shout out to Sherry, my therapist. So the guy that I was seeing, he made this game about abusive relationships, modeled on yours truly, eh? So in that game, you need to like give, I think, the other person like some of your energy to like boost them so they can go further, but I don't think that they give you any energy back. So it's just sort of like you doing everything, and like, but I think the game makes you really care about this like other player. I don't even know if this is how the game works. Hey, like this is just what he said to me. I haven't played it as yet, but by the end of it, you don't have obviously any energy left because like a lot of the time in our relationship, he's like my first boyfriend, whatever. Don't date boys. That's the model of the story. And yeah, I didn't know how to like love someone healthily, love anything healthily, really. I thought like a lot meant good, but like quality, you know, not quantity, if that makes sense. And that, like him making that game and just me understanding like through the mechanics of that game how he was feeling. I mean, he's like my favorite person in the world. We're like absolutely best friends because we could work through a lot of these things. And that game helped me realize how much I was just like taking, you know, and I wasn't like cognizant that every time I would freak out, I would I don't mean freak out, I mean have a mental breakdown and want to tear my head off. I would need him to like help calm me down, but I never thought of like the effect it would have on him. I just thought like, well, you're not depressed, you don't have borderline personality disorder, so you know, it's like you need to be there for me because like you like neurotypical, so like fuck you. I didn't think that, but you know, I thought that. So I think that like that game is something, and like I think games generally definitely have the capability of improving your life. I mean, there's like a lot of self-care apps or whatever. It's just not for me. But like in this particular instance, that game really was like such a visual representation of the things he was telling me, how he was feeling, but it just made it more concrete. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think games have a really powerful capacity to represent metaphor like that. I made a game myself for a relationship that I was in at one point called Distance to try to capture the feeling of being in a long distance relationship, where at first it's, you know, you just come together and then after a while it starts getting harder and harder, and the final level you just can't even come together at all. And the number of people who I've had reach out to me and say like that really, like it was just 2 dots on a screen with some like abstract shapes, but the number of people who have reached out and said, you captured my experience, like that's so moving. And to be able to tell a story like that and be able to reach someone and say like, this is how I'm feeling, I think there's an incredible capacity for interactivity for that kind of storytelling. Go ahead.
Yeah,
did you have something?
No, I didn't have
just
an example
agreeing?
of that, but yeah, just agreeing that,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's amazing that games can represent something as abstract of like, oh, I feel this way about this subject, or like, oh, yeah, just even communicating to someone, just like, yeah, this is just something really tough that I've gone through. Here's it broken down in a way to where you can understand without having to directly live it.
Yeah, it's like a modicum of understanding and feeling enough to help get the idea across.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So like all of these things being said, all of the talk of, you know, different kinds of inputs, different ways of telling stories, different ways of kind of crossing over medium, how do you see games moving forward? How do you see things changing as we evolve, as we start acknowledging games as art, as we start seeing experimentation as being imperative to the growth of the industry? Like, what are some things that you're seeing happening now, or what are some things that you would like to see happen that will kind of continue this push toward betterment or storytelling or expression?
So earlier on, someone came and played after hours, and I was speaking to them about how, so I'm from South Africa, and there's this sort of idea that's drilled into us that you need to make games that are like accepted globally or like appeal to a Western audience and things like that. But I think that's bullshit, so I just make whatever I want. And I feel like because obviously this is not like everybody's experience, but because I am like that, it resulted in me making after hours. And I think that like, I mean like this, the title of this whole panel is like celebrating unique games. I think you can't have like very unique games if you don't have diversity within like the games industry.
Absolutely.
So I think like that's where it needs to begin. You know, it's not about like, oh, a bunch of white people making like really beautiful art. that's so what, you know? We need to have things from like different genders, different races, different countries, all of those things, because I think all of that leads to a much richer experience for everyone. There's literally no way that's a bad thing at all. So like when I started university, I think there were 7 girls in my class, and it made me feel like super uncomfortable. Also, majority of them were white, and I just didn't, like, at that time feel very comfortable around a lot of white people. But now my degree has expanded a lot, and there's so many people of color and women and things like that, and the kind of work that I think being produced now is way more important and interesting and real almost. So yeah,
I agree. I think that's something, seeing conversations, hearing more conversations about inclusivity, seeing more games from people from not North America, seeing more games from people of color, people who are, you know, queer and who are in other ways marginalized, I think is massively expanding the industry and massively expanding the things that we see possible and the stories that we see possible with games.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that has to not just be like spoken about in a panel or like tweeted or whatever. It needs to actively be done, you know? And like white people have the most privilege, so they're the ones that can really, really help by using that privilege to provide like platforms for us and all of these things. And I know a lot of like really good white people that have been doing that and have helped me, you know, in like my specific career path and whatever. So I feel like by doing that sort of thing, you welcome so many more people that otherwise would not have been here and didn't think that they had a space within this industry.
Yeah. Like, once again, shout out to like the Game Devs of Color Expo. They helped get me out to GDC in the last year, and like it's just super awesome that there's just like things in place to help with things like that. But yeah, I think that for games to just like kind of evolve, and I think the next steps is like we're just gonna see a lot of just weird shit come out, just a lot of just really weird and experimental stuff, a lot of personal stuff. And yeah, I agree. Like a lot of stuff from just voices from around the world, because just having met the people I've met in the last year, and like getting to go to game spaces and even non-game spaces. Like I showed the game in Amsterdam at IDFA, which is a independent. It's like the world's largest like documentary film festival ever, and it's just like that sounds like the furthest thing from games, or not the furthest thing, but it's like so far from games, and yet they were interested in this game, having it there just as an art installation. And I think it's just really important to like cross the boundaries of just like, I don't know, just blur like all kinds of lines, just like whatever you can, just like go against the grain, go against what's in place, because I think tradition is something that's really holding games back. Like I don't know, just too many FPS games, too many shooters. I don't know, and like Trump doesn't need any more reasons to blame us for the reasons why these like school shootings are happening.
I think the democratization of games has really helped this industry, a community more like. So the dev tools have gotten a lot more open. So like when Unity came out, it was free. So like anyone with a decent computer could make a game, and now we have all these small engines like the wonderful Bitsy and like Flixie and just a bunch of like really small stuff. Twine allow people that aren't in the golden graces of the industry to flourish and to self-express. Like back on like the NES and stuff, you had to know how to like write assembly, and you had to go to college or to learn that, and you had to like have connections. I think now you can create something and put it out there without like this intense background of this industry and like all these connections. You just like make something.
Yeah. So we have a couple of minutes. We could take a couple of questions. If folks have questions for our panelists, we may be able to run a microphone even down to you so that we can hear you on the recording later. Do we have anybody who has any questions for us? Cool.
Hi there. So, yeah. So when I was a child, I played games as an escape from the world, but also I played games in a way that I feel like they weren't intended to be played. I would play Super Mario 64, and there's a little hat that you could put on to fly, and I would jump in the sky and fly and see how long I could dance before the character died. So like, I play Spider-Man now, and I swing through this city knowing that there are sirens going on and ignoring them, because that's what I did when I lived in Brooklyn growing up. So I wanted to know if there are unique ways that you have played games that are more traditional AAA experiences and just found the thing that you wanted to do in those and had those experiences through that.
Yeah, Sonic Adventure. Remember that? Like in like every Sonic game, you can plug in like a controller into the second slot and play as Tails. And I was the younger brother, so I was always Tails. And so I would find oftentimes my brother and I, like he would be Sonic and I would be Tails, and we'd just like find little games within the environment to just like kind of play with each other. Like I don't like if it's like a city level, we just like see like, okay, Tails is invincible. Let's see like if he can cross all these streets without getting hit by like the car like prop that just like goes by or whatever. Or we just like
Sonic Frogger?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, we just like find little things to do, and I think that so many games kind of want to like stress you out. They want to give you time limits and impose rules on you to get you to like do this thing and like triumph over like against the clock or whatever. But I feel like when you get down to the root of play, like that never really was a thing that was there in the first place. Like when someone hands you like an action figure, they're not like, okay, here's what you have to do with this. Like you're just free to play with it however you want. And that's kind of what I'm trying to go for with my game, is just like you're free to just play. And I think a lot more games can just offer a sandbox to do that, but not really like tell you what to do. And so I think that's an important part of play.
Yeah, actually, I think it's really, really cool when games actively and thoughtfully provide that space where you can approach the game in a way that when you're entering into the game, you may not expect to be able to do something like that. But even, you mentioned specifically AAA, Jordan, where are there games where you're doing something that you're not expecting to? And I think that one AAA game, I don't play very many AAA games, I have to admit, but one AAA game that I've played a lot of that does that is Destiny, where they provide the tower space, where it's like the chill space where you can just kind of hang out and chat, or like chill with your friends, buy stuff from NPCs, but there's also a ball in the tower, right? And in Destiny 2, there's goals, but in Destiny 1, there's just a ball. Imagine what you, in an MMO space, can do with a ball in a place where there's no violence, there's no enemies, it's just you, a bunch of online players, no goal, but a ball. You make friends. And that's really cool. And you know that they put that ball in there intentionally, and you know that they expected something to happen, but I'm sure things have happened with that ball that the designers never intended. And that, I think, is really cool.
One thing that I saw recently was there was an article, I think, on Wired about people that would get out of bounds on Red Dead Redemption 2 online and just kind of experience the glitched hellscape that's out there, because the game's rendering, it has to, but there's nothing really out there. So it's kind of this sightseeing tour of unintended consequences. So like seeing all the glitches, trying to figure out what's going on with how the game is being produced. And it's very clearly against the developer's intentions. It's like distinctly against their role. You're out of bounds. You're not supposed to be there. And I think that's a really interesting like self-expression. Is just creating your own goals, seeing what's out there, and creating your own fun with it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's a really good question to wrap up on. Do y'all want to let everybody know how folks can find you online, or later on if they have more questions for you or just want to get in touch? Adam, go.
I can start. I'm at R25th on Twitter and R25th.com and R25th on itch. That's just me everywhere. So I'm constantly on Twitter, like way too much. So if you need something, just like hit me up.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, underscore TEJAY5. There's an underscore there, so I need to point that out because I can't change it because it gets rid of your verified mark, and then it's so annoying and dumb. Anyway,
Humble brag.
no, like I'm so mad about it. Like, why? I just want to get rid of the underscore because it's so hard to explain. Anyway, and at Terrifying Jellyfish on Instagram, I always post like screenshots of what I'm working on, and on Twitch. Also, like Terrifying Jellyfish, I sometimes stream my process, so like hopefully you can like learn a thing or two from that.
So I'm just on Twitter by that handle, Bahiyya. And I have business cards. I guess if you come to me, I can give you a business card and a sticker. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm Carol Mertz. You can find me on Twitter at Carol Mertz. I also represent PixelPop Festival, which you can find online at PixelPop Fest on just about every social media thing, maybe. And you can also reach us at pixelpopfestival.com, where you can sign up for our mailing list so you can get notified whenever all of these wonderful conference videos go up. And that is a wrap for the 6th annual PixelPop Festival. Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you all to our wonderful speakers, our panelists today. All of our speakers this weekend have been great. Thank you to our exhibitors who've been spending your time showing your games with us. Thank you to all of our volunteers who have been spending your time making sure that we're all on time and fed and rested. Thank you to our sponsors, especially to the SLU Shapeit Center for Entrepreneurship for providing us this space, and to Riot Games and to the NYU Game Center for making the conference sessions possible. Thank you so, so much to our incredible staff this year, to Jordan Jones-Brewster, our sessions manager, to Jillian Stiles, our community director, to Mary Mackenzie Kelly, our games director outside. We have Alex back here taking video for us. We have Emmy taking photos. We have Rachel at the front checking people in. We have Jalen in the expo hall making sure everybody's taken care of. We have Kirby Weber, who is probably off at the party getting set up now. And I think I got everybody. There are so many amazing people that work so hard to put this festival together, and we cannot thank you all enough for being here and giving us your time and being a part of our community. It means the world to us, so thank you all.
And thanks to Carol Mertz for being amazing.
Thank you.
Woo!
So this is it, but it's not quite it because we still have an after party.
After party.
That sounded weird. It's not really, actually, it's not like a party. It's like we're at a board game cafe. So that's from 7 to 10 p.m. at Pieces in Soulard. It is a wonderful place. If you haven't been there, I strongly suggest you come. It's super chill. We're going to have free hors d'oeuvres for everybody. You have to pay for your own drinks. Sorry, we pay for food, but not your booze. And if you are there, come say hi, give us hugs, or don't. I mean, ask permission before you give us hugs, please. And if you don't come, please do follow us on our social media platforms so that we can update you on when next year's will be and when all of these wonderful videos go up. So thank you all once again.